The news now, the discovery of the Omicron variant of the coronavirus is yet another disruption to our education system. Now, for the past 2 years, schooling has been intermittent. Omicron is highly transmissible among children and is bound to delay the return to normal schooling. But there is an initiative to reboot the country's education program. For more on this, I'm joined this hour by the CEO, the boss himself of the National Education Collaboration Trust, that's the NECT, Mr. Godwin Khosa. Good afternoon, sir, and thank you very much for your time. Let me begin with an overriding question first. At a high level, what is this rebooting of the education system program really about? Before we get into the nitty-gritty.
So, good afternoon, Mr. Moyane, and to the viewers. If your computer shuts down, it requires a moment and an effort to reboot. So the concept of rebooting is actually drawn from that. We're very clear in our thinking about recovery that there is no recovery that's going to take place before we reboot, the system. We have to get operations back on track. We need to get our learners back into the classrooms. We need to get our teachers teaching optimally. So all those systems that have gone in a state of lull have to be reawakened, and we need to create the right environments for the system to operate optimally.
Okay. Now, you've done some research recently as a NECT, as recent as November. What did you find that has convinced you for the need to reboot the system?
So the attempt to reboot the system has been made by the Department of Education since the middle of last year, when they brought in regulations to bring back some of the learners and so on. But we know that majority of our schools have been on rotation, which means that actually learners and teachers meet almost half the time that they're supposed to be meeting. So since the latter half of this year, we've been working with the Department of Education to understand what the impacts of COVID in schools is. The impact is so severe. So in the research, we found that about 60% of the schools could only cover about 30% of the trimmed curriculum that is required of the classrooms. So it's not the normal curriculum, 30% of the trimmed curriculum. So the business of our learners coming to school for some of the days and some of the weeks that are required under normal circumstances is actually creating huge havoc in the education system. And therefore, in the past 3 months, we've jacked up, attempts to prepare for an optimal and perhaps a full operation of the education system going forward, depending on what we get from the Department of Health in terms of guidance and of course, how Omicron behaves going forward.
Okay, now Omicron is with us. We don't know, as you say, how it's going to behave going forward. But the 2022 academic calendar year is just around the corner, and it has to be prepared for. You've issued a statement as a NECT that things have to be done differently. You are collaborating as the trust with the Department of Basic Education and other stakeholders. What is going to be different next year?
Well, firstly, we have an opportunity as a nation, and I suppose as a globe, to take full advantage of the vaccinations. The fact that our under 18s, 12 to 18 can now vaccinate, I think it's a huge opportunity. And I think that's the first thing that we need to get the country to do. We must get learners vaccinated, as much as over 90% of our teachers have been vaccinated. And thanks to the teacher unions who have been very supportive of this move. If we did that, I think it would give the clinicians a much confidence to give us green light to bring back as many of our kids back into the schools. Once the teachers and the kids are back in the school, in the camp, then we can start in earnest the process of recovering what we've lost in the past 2 years. We are prepared. We have prepared material for teachers that will help them to reorganize the curriculum and to pace it up on a daily basis to make sure that they cover most of what they're supposed to cover in order for the learners to regain what they would have lost in the past. We've developed new material for support of teachers and learners in as far as psychosocial support is concerned. But even more importantly, stakeholders would have to come together and work together on this. Teacher unions, teachers, parents, communities, as well as NGOs, some of which we have started working on to support the Presidential Youth Employment Program, which has put 22,000 youth in the schools that support teachers. We've trained about 16,000 of those, and we really are ready, to get things back on track. But that would happen if everybody brings their hands on deck.
In that everybody, do you include, for example, parents, the role of parents? Because time and again, when we talk about schooling, we are told that parents have a critical role.
So parents, the involvement of parents in this country has been a big challenge. And I mean, compared to some of the countries and more developed countries, our parents are less involved in education. This year, for the first time, we're making a taking a big step to develop curriculum trackers, so trackers of the syllabus, simplified, that we want to give to parents so that parents can know and expect what has to be taught in the classroom. So in that sense, if both the teacher and the parent are moving on the same plan, we hopefully can, incentivize more teachers to get in, more parents to get involved in the education of their kids. But Mr. Moyan, getting involved also means eNCA. There's lots of space that we could be using to put out learning and teaching programs for learners that they can access. And fortunately, you access eNCA and some of the TV stations freely, and they reach the corners of this country. So everybody actually means everybody that has what it takes to support this recovery of education.
Yeah, no, I think you need to speak to Norman Munzelele, our MD, about eNCA's involvement there. But it is a very serious issue that the media can play in assisting in education. Now, one of the issues that keeps on cropping up, it's about the lack of culture of reading, for example, especially at the basic education level. And then we talk about issues of literacy and challenges around numeracy. And in recovering these learning programs, will there be a focus in 2022 on those two areas, being numeracy and literacy?
So we have been relentlessly working in those spaces. Given that these are our Achilles heels in South Africa, we keep looking for ways in which we can break the back of illiteracy and poor reading standards in the country, as well as numeracy competencies. So we have, for instance, a partnership with UNICEF and the European Union. We're very busy preparing to deliver about 230,000 books that will be immediately available to learners, and particularly learners from schools that are in impoverished parts of our country. By the first quarter of the coming year, they will have those books. But what even excites me more, we're trying out compressing reading stories into social media packages. So reading stories that we can send via WhatsApp and that sort of thing. So we're taking advantage of technology to increase access to reading materials to learners and teachers and their parents. So it's up to the parents actually to take some of these, take advantage of some of these opportunities that we're opening up.
Okay. Mr. Khosa, finally, the coronavirus pandemic has brought along with it huge mental health challenges. Our mental health well-being has been really affected big time, and in a country that's already battling with a lot of mental health, wellness and well-being challenges. Psychosocial support in our schools, will that form part of the new rebooted programs for 2022? Because also we know challenges of violence that we've seen recently in our schools.
Very much so, and just to extend, the understanding into the classroom. One way in which the psychosocial, challenges have increased is the readiness of our learners to learn. So there's research in the education space that has identified that our learners actually memory, space and time has been reduced. So kids forget, and they've forgotten what we've taught them in the past. But even more, kids have missed the opportunity to learn certain things at the right age. So they've missed the learning opportunities. So from a psychosocial support point of view and the delivery of the curriculum as teachers and educationists, we have to make sure that we teach them what they've missed at particular ages, but also just the well-being of teachers and learners. We have developed new material, we've developed new resources, and in fact, we're strengthening the school-based and the district-level-based structures that provide psychosocial support. The research that we did, middle of this year, identified, in fact, pinpointed that 80% of our schools actually have school-based psychosocial support. So it's those structures that we want to strengthen, because they are the first points where the teachers and the learners must run to, and then they must go to psychological services, perhaps outside the department. But there again is a space where churches and synagogues and whatever can come and join the schools and the education system to provide psychosocial support. Psychological challenges are, the new actually challenges that we have to deal with, going forward. In education, as well as in social development and health, we've got to provide, more and new ways of assisting our staff and learners to cope with the psychological impact that we've gone through in the past two years.
Thank you very much for your time. That's Mr. Godwin Khosa. He's the CEO of the National Education Collaboration Trust.